Chapter 33. Back to the story about how I met Felix, the depressive ostrich. If you don't know what an ostrich is, it is like a mix between a bird and a giraffe, just like a gin and tonic is a mix of gin and tonic. We stood in line at the employment agency when I saw this weird shadow behind me. I turned around and saw Felix standing behind me, scratching with a foot on the backside of his leg. I'd never seen an ostrich before, not even on TV, so I got a little nervous. What kind of job would a strange creature like that look for? It seemed unlikely that he would want to become a rock star, but you never know. I wouldn't feel calm until I asked him. "Excuse me?" I said, and squinted up at the sun. "What kind of job will you apply for?"
What does it concern you?
I'm afraid that somebody wants to apply for the job I want, so I ask people what job they will apply for, so I can make sure that they won't apply for the job I want.
What kind of job will you apply for?
The ostrich said, suddenly interested. I don't want to say.
Then why should I say?
Guess that's fair. I want to be a superstar. But don't tell anyone, I whispered. It's a secret. Felix lowered his head so we were on eye level with each other. I noticed that he had a piercing in his eyebrow.
I promise,
he whispered back, and then he raised his head again and said amused,
You know, I used to be a superstar, so if you have any questions, you can ask me anything.
You were a superstar? I said and tried not to look scared. I mean, you were?
I was the main attraction of the circus where I worked. People came from far and wide to see me, and every time that the show was over, they would stand up, applaud, and shout, Da capo! Da capo!
What does that mean? Da capo?
It's Italian for from the beginning,
Felix said like it would be self-explanatory. Ah, da capo, yeah, I knew that. And then I asked, a little anxiously, what did you do? It scared me a bit that some other superstar had a show that was so good that people wanted to see it all over again. Not even in my wildest fantasies had the audience yelled da capo at my shows. It sounded very classy. At most, they yelled for an encore, but it was pretty standard in the music industry, nothing to brag about, but if I would have started the whole concert all over again, people would have gone, wow, Sir Lanka, slow down, we love you, but not that much. We've had a good time, but now we are tired and we want to go home. So I was very curious about what the ostrich did that people were so thrilled about.
Suicides,
the ostrich said, and fanned himself with his wing because of the heat. Suicides? I asked.
Yes, I would commit suicide on stage.
I'm sorry, I said. I don't really understand.
Well, it's hard to believe,
the ostrich said.
But I was born with a very special gift. I can't die.
You can't?
No,
the ostrich said snoodily.
I'm immortal. I got the gift from my father. Maybe you've heard of him. The immortal phoenix.
He fanned himself with his right wing.
He flew by our town one day many years ago, got drunk and fucked a turkey, and a few months later I was born. And in honor of my father, my mother named me Felix. It means the happy. My father left the very next day, but she loved to tell that story. About that night when she met the great phoenix, how he seduced her and what an ass he was for leaving her. Later, she sold me to a circus so that she could afford to go and look for him.
How terrible. My mom aborted me yesterday, and then they drove me to a dump and left me there. Felix looked at me as if he was annoyed that I interrupted.
Well, I can't complain. Have you ever been to a circus? It's wonderful. I once met an elephant that could balance on a toothpick, and a tightrope walker who used to philosophize while she walked between two skyscrapers.
Wow.
Well, of course, all their acts faded compared to mine. My best number was to put my head in a grinder, but I also did some beheadings and executions by firing squad, and at the end of each performance the children were allowed to come down and execute me themselves. We had all kinds of weapons, knives, and guns, and everyone was allowed to try. The sound of children's laughter. Of course you feel pain, but I fell in love with performing, and the audience loved me. If you could hear the applause every time that my head grew out again, they were like crazy, howling, screaming for an encore. Da capo, da capo, da capo, every night. I died and rose like a star. But then the authorities showed up and banned my show. They said that it was animal cruelty and threatened to send the circus director to jail if my show didn't stop immediately. Of course, we tried to fight it, but by the time we got our case to court, the circus had already gone bankrupt and everybody was fired. It turned out people weren't interested in paying to see jugglers and acrobats.
So what happened next?
Well, I took it pretty hard at first. I missed the applauses and the attention. I sank into a depression until I realized I didn't have to be on stage to kill myself. I could get the attention anyway. So the next day I walked out on a bridge, climbed up on the railings and began to shout, "I am going to kill myself! I am really going to do it!" Of course, the police showed up. They closed off the bridge. People looked from the roadblocks, and I remember there was also a helicopter that was reporting on the traffic jam. The traffic here on the Queen's Bridge has come to a complete stop. It seems like an ostrich has climbed up on the railings and has threatened to kill itself. Very strange situation as traffic is building up in all directions. Already we have received several messages on social media from angry drivers saying, "Why don't you just shoot the bird? Animals don't belong in the city." And last time I had to wait in traffic like this, I took it out on my wife and kids when I came home. So there is definitely a lot of road rage building up down there. What do you think? Should the police just shoot the bird? Or do you have any other suggestion? Make sure you leave your comment on our website. Then the cops started screaming, "Don't jump, you have so much to live for." I even let them try to talk me out of it. It felt so good to stand up there. And then, when it almost seemed like I would climb down, I jumped and got smashed on the road below. When I resurrected, people thought it was a miracle. They even showed me on TV. Later, I tried to repeat it someplace else, but it's like the story of the boy who cried wolf, the ostrich said. You can only cry, "I'll kill myself," and survive miraculously a certain number of times before people start to lose interest. Over time, I got more depressed to the point that I almost felt suicidal. I tried to talk about it with a psychologist, but she just laughed at me. And I was like, no, I'm really suicidal. I really am. Then she leaned forward and said, "Felix, you're a textbook case of a person suffering from histrionic personality disorder. In layman's terms, you're an attention whore. You've learned to use your suicides as a way to get attention, probably to compensate for the fact that your mother abandoned you. It is part of your treatment that you realize that not everything revolves around you. For instance, you have not asked me a single question since you came in here. You haven't even asked me how I am doing, but just prattled on about yourself and how suicidal you are."
Felix suddenly looked up.
Hi, we are really sorry for bothering. We just wanted to say that we are huge fans. Yeah, you're like a hero to us. We've seen your show like at least 1,000 times.
When I turned around, 2 boys were standing there. The 2 were obviously brothers.
"Oh, that is no problem," Felix said. "It is always nice to speak with 2 of my fans."
Can we get an autograph? We tried to get one at the show, but never had a chance.
I felt so jealous right now.
"Of course.
One of the guys gave him something to write on.
You want me to write something special?"
Oh,
One of the boys said and looked at his brother.
could you write to Simon, "Practice makes perfect," or "Better luck next time"?
And then they started to roar with laughter. Neither Felix nor I understood what was so funny.
Simon was our brother.
One of the guys explained when they'd stopped laughing.
Not the brightest one. Well, he was only 7. And also believed you could levitate if you sat cross-legged long enough. We always used to go to your show, and afterwards we would go down and shoot you a couple times with a gun.
"Ah, yeah, I remember. Your brother has red hair, doesn't he? And freckles all over his face."
That's him,
The brother said.
He always used to say, "Oh, one day I'm going to be like Felix." We tried to explain to him that was not possible, but he wouldn't listen. And then he somehow managed to steal our dad's gun. and told a friend to shoot him in the head. His friend said that it was impossible, but our brother insisted. It was true. He'd seen it. If you shot somebody, they'd just come back to life. And then they made a bet. If our brother was right, his friend would let him ask out his 14-year-old sister. And if his friend was right, they would get our brother's tarantula. So they were in the living room. The friend aimed at his head and shot him. Then he waited at our brother's body for him to resurrect. When nothing happened, he said that he first left the room terrified, but then he came back, scooped up the tarantula from the aquarium, and left the room.
Okay,
Felix said, grabbing the pen with his wing.
To Simon. Better luck next time. The immortal Felix. Is it good?
Yes, thank you so much,
The brother said. Would you also like to get my autograph? I heard myself say, a little bit too keen. Felix, Boris, and the two brothers looked at me, and I could feel how Boris just shook his head. The cue